Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we tackle the issues. We talk about the things that affect the customer experience at your store. And although, everybody that you talk to, that was their number one priority, customer experience for 2023, the reality is what the dealers thoughts were on customer experience did not exactly meet up with what the customers' thoughts were on customer experience. And there were some things that consumers still aren't happy with. And so what we're going to talk about tonight with my good friend, Paul Machin, the data expert from Black Book, is what happened last year? What's the data tell us? What's the current state of the market? And what can we anticipate going forward? And how will we navigate the waters of customer experience going forward? Because what we think it is as dealers is not necessarily what dealers think it is. And we're going to go over some of the top things that customers complained about. And I'm going to share some really easy practices on how to overcome some of that. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, sir. It's been a while. I'm glad to be back and in discussions with you to share some of the information we have and how dealers can be better prepared in 2024. It's going to be a volatile year. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
So tell us a little bit about you for the one or two folks that might not know you.
So I've been with Black Book now 5 years. Been in the industry for over 30 years. Started half my career was on the retail side of the business. And I'd say my most significant contribution as a disruptor is 12 years in a Saturn, in Rick Hendrick for Saturn, 7.5 years running one of his Saturn stores. And then I went to CarMax and ran a CarMax location for 5 years before I was in a small Nissan store. Did that for a couple of years. And then I went to Dealer Track. I took all that disruptive retail experience that I had done in the industry for real and put it behind the software and introduced that kind of technology and a process to dealers. And let me tell you, it was in the early days, it was like dragging them through mud by their nose hairs.
You know what I love about the progression is that you have real world experience. So you talk the talk, you know the language, and then you add to that on the vendor side where we're looking at data and we're looking at information that might not be second nature to most people.
Right. And getting done this side of the business really opened my eyes even more. Realized I knew that this kind of insight was there, just didn't know where to find it. And now that I'm here, I love what I do.
I say the data tells one story, the people tell another story, and somewhere between is an action plan that can be crafted from it. That's right. You need to be able to look at all sides to come up with a real plan. So let's talk about what happened last year. Want me to bring this up on the screen now?
Yeah, sure. This part we'll just have a conversation, on that. So we finished estimates right now is 15.6 million new car sales, which is up from last year. But think in terms of replenishing the used vehicle market, right? We still didn't sell enough new vehicles to meet the needs for the next 3 years of the 0 to 3 year old inventory. We haven't sold enough new vehicle inventory since pre-pandemic to meet the needs of the 0 to 3 model inventory that's so precious to us today. And then you take a look at what was sold on the used vehicle side. Their estimates right now is right at 38.5, almost 39 million. Been that way for almost 20 years. It's between 38 and 41 million used units. About half of that has been on the private party side of the business. So that accounts for, individual sales, used vehicle registrations. You sell the car to somebody, that also is in that number. Now you take that half, independent and franchise. What's the divvy? We saw a pivot early summer where the actual used vehicle listings available, the greater percentage was showing up on the independent dealer inventory. Now, you and I both know that means that inventory is higher mileage, edgier, and more often than not a late model, meaning 0 to 3 year old vehicle that most consumers would like to buy. But we saw that flip, right? And then towards August, we started seeing pricing bands, right? What percent of inventory that's available for you and I to search from, right? And so the majority of the inventory that's $25,000 and above, over 60%, that's what was listed in franchise inventory. The affordable mix, $20,000 and less for people, most consumers in the marketplace, was the lowest percentage of available inventory. And what even makes that even more concerning is the lower mileage inventory for 1 to 3 year olds. There's not that many. There wasn't many then, and there's not that many now. Now, in June, if you remember, I shared with you how I started cautioning dealers. They need to start taking a look at realigning their inventory based on their specific market dynamics. Understand everything about their consumer, their buyers, not what the advertising companies telling them they need to do, but actually get into the research themselves. Have those kinds of conversations by pulling Experian data, by pulling Bureau of Labor Statistics data down to the zip code that gives you the average family household, what their average income is, and align your inventory to fit that. Because I started noticing is that the majority of dealers today, they're out of alignment. Their inventory does not match what their buyers need. So to your point, is the customer getting the experience when that happens?
No.
No. But what they do is they say, you're trying to buy a vehicle to fit your budget. I got to sell you, instead of selling you what you want, now I got to see what I can sell you, because I can sell you what I've got, and what I've got doesn't fit what you need. So now I've really got to sell you. That's a different strategy than what it's been for the last 3 years. Last 3 years is, what do you want? Take the car, get out of the way if you don't want it, right? Not now.
Well, what's interesting is that a couple of things, and we'll get into this particular part of it a little bit later, but as of January this year, there's some good news on the used car front with some incentives that have come along to help the used car market, which we'll get into that conversation. But also, early in the pandemic, when there was no inventory, the rental fleets, they were holding back on the cars, keeping them longer. So that depleted a lot of the cars that would ordinarily end up on dealership lots.
Correct.
So that still doesn't sound like that's really worked itself out yet.
No. And actually I'm calling this year the great head fake, the Pareto principle in full effect. Are you familiar with the Pareto principle? It's the 20% of performance, products, process actually do 80% of the profit or the results.
Yeah. Right.
And it's true in our industry, and it's more so now than ever. I just shared it with you. Can you see that? Yeah,
Paul, I say 95-5 is the new 80-20.
Very possible. So I really do think that with the AI, we'll see some adjustments in all of these standard norms, because these are just an aggregate assessment of a total group of numbers, right? When you really dive into the details, like Jason Rice, I love what Jason Rice says all the time. He often says that, he's dealing with these dealers, and he's like, do you realize that all these leads you're telling me you're getting is like on 2 or 3 vehicles, and 1 vehicle you don't even have in stock anymore, right? Pareto, right. That's the Pareto principle effect. So dealers are thinking, I'm getting all these leads, but you're only getting that on 2, 3, 4, 5 of your vehicles that are in inventory, because as dealers, they're not paying attention. They're just saying, I got inventory. Well, this isn't the right type of inventory, which is, again, goes back to understanding your local dynamic and your market. Just don't buy inventory to have inventory.
Right.
Right. And so there was a quote, a buddy of mine sent me this quote today from Jason. He said, look, leads per car are trending down, and a percent of the inventory with no leads are increasing. You want to guess why that's happening? It's not just the Pareto principle. It's what you and I were talking about, the ability for people to be able to afford what's in inventory. They can't. And
the data shows that consumers have been more price conscious the last year. And I think for the first time in a long time, the rate of first time buyers has actually gone down also, because these aren't people that are 100% familiar with what the market's doing. They're not reading the magazines. They're not in the business. and they're coming in and they're having sticker shock, and they're like, whoa, yeah, you know what? We're gonna hold off for a little bit. Let me get to a couple of comments before we go too much further. Peter Smith is the first one to chime in with looking forward to this show. Welcome, Peter. And Russell B. Hill, hello and good evening, Paul and Paul. Hey, that would be Paul squared, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Russell Smith says, hello, Peter Smith. And Peter Smith says, good evening, Russell. Linda Hansen, happy 2024. I totally forgot to say Happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2024. When you're always go, 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 it seems like every day is the same. And sometimes you find yourself, if you're in a store somewhere, hey, what day is this anyway? Because you're always go, go, go. So happy New Year to everybody. I hope this is everybody's great year. I know it's going to be mine. I have a feeling it's going to be Paul's as well. And a lot of other people that I know that have been preparing and getting ready for what's going to happen this year.
So you and I were talking just before the show started. What drove the December over December lift in sales rate, and for month over month lift in sales rate, and it was the new car OEs providing increased incentives, especially the 0% financing. Right, so you had a very small section of the population that could actually qualify for 0% financing, which is, they said it's about 2.6, almost 3%, were able to finance it. Then they talked about the average down payment for the new vehicle for the first time ever has gone over $7,000. But what they don't tell you is the breakdown of that cash or that equity into the deal. How much of that is a cash rebate that's being listed as cash down? What's the true cash, right? And that's the number that we've got to get. And dealers have it on an individual store by store basis in their DMS system. And that's what they got to drill into to understand. Does my inventory, because what happens on the new car side trickles down eventually to the used car side, right?
Right. And I like Brian Kramer's thought process of just focus on buying the car from them, right? Don't make it about the if I could, would you? Focus on buying their car and let them figure out what they're going to drive next. Too many people, they talk about service advisors, pencil whipping, inspections. Well, how many salespeople pencil whip opportunities?
Right. So there's this whole, we have buyers who have one expectation, and they have that expectation because of the way they are interpreting the information that's being shared with them. And then we have an expectation, the dealers do. And there's, we were talking, there's the great customer conflict between customers want customer experience, but we're not actually able to deliver it the way they want it. They want it from sales to service to finance. And we really need to change that. One of the things I want to share with you, it's a connected industry, but it highlights what I just described to you, right? Are you familiar with the FANG stocks, the Magnificent Seven? Not the movie, right? Not the movie Magnificent Seven. But you know what FANG stocks are?
No.
The top 7, right? We're talking Facebook, now Meta, Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA, and Google.
Yeah, okay.
So what I think is really a play on statistics, right? And that's wrong in just every kind of marketing aspect. Right now, you cannot listen to any kind of financial media and hear the truth about what is really happening in the financial markets, right? They say, oh, we've just finished a phenomenal year. But what they're not telling you is that these 7 stocks are responsible for over 60% of the performance. So they sold this whole industry based on diluting the lower performers with the high performer averages. It's like saying I've got 10 salespeople in my store, and I'm averaging 200 cars a month, but only 3 of them sell 50 cars a month.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? So what's the real number? Well, CBS back on December the 28th put out or CNBC, I should say. They said that, a remarkable stock market year, but what should you worry about? They're the first ones that actually removed those FANG stocks, the top performers, the Pareto principle I'm talking about, right? and found out that the performance in the S&P 500 was less than 10%, which if you're a long-term investor, a 10% annual return is not a bad deal over the long term. But you were just told that the entire market, the entire S&P is performed at the highest level ever. That's a flat out lie. It's a manipulation of the data. So the consumers are getting this information. The dealers are getting this kind of information relevant to our business. So it's not just happening in our business, it's happening in every business. So we're flummoxed into believing that things are one way and they're actually another. It's the Pareto principle. How we have an industry right now that for the first time, it's blatant. 20% of the consumers are driving 80% of our sales. So what about the other 80%? How do we take care of those consumers? Right? And that's the industry challenge we're going to have this year in 2024, is looking at taking care of those consumers, because the driver, the higher credit scores, they bought a lot in last year. They sure did, especially when prices went down. Does any of that make sense to you?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is regarding the whole credit issue. 700 2 years ago isn't 700 today. I mean, you're begging the bank to get a Tier 1 approval at 718.
And I'm going to show you why. So this is an article that was put out December 16th. And it was actually a red alert article. Actually, it was a red alert put out by the Department of Education to the government. They said, shocker, shocker. 40% of student loan borrowers missed their first payment since the COVID pause. And you got to go back. That means they haven't made a payment in 3 years. So if you were a college graduate 3 years ago, $80,000 in student loan debt, you still haven't made your first payment. What did you do with all the opportunity you had to save your money for the last 3 years? And now,
look in the driveway.
yeah, they got a brand new car, right? So guess what? Those students, that 40%, it's like 8 to 9 million consumers. And that's just the student loan side of the business. We haven't even talked about how are they doing on their mortgages if they got one? How about their apartment? How about their car payment? If they, how are they doing on that? Now we added on top student loans, huge challenge. And I'm sharing this with you because for the dealers in 2024, tremendous opportunity, because these are consumers. These people I'm talking about, they know how to pay their bills because they were perfect pre-pandemic, right? They were raised to pay their bills. They were raised as credit consumers. Get a job, make your money, pay your credit card bill, and live your life. And just rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And for the first time in the last 3 years, their training, their upbringing, their education didn't work. And now they're struggling because what they were trained to do can't keep up with what's happening in the market. Not just in the market, when you actually factor in the cost of food and energy, that's really what's really put everyone in a pinch with the high cost of interest rates, right? Now, as lenders that own those student loan debt, they're not reported yet to the credit agencies. So like you said,
it hasn't shown as a loss yet.
There's not a charge. There's no late payment delinquencies on these. 9 million people don't have a delinquency on their credit report for the student loan payment. And that's just one category of loans. There's a great report that Experian came out with. This is their Q3 State of the Automotive Finance Report. And you and I have had this conversation many times, where we talked about how quarter over quarter, we're noticing a less and less near prime and subprime consumers are actually getting approved, getting advanced.
Right.
So for 3 years in a row, in this article right here, this report, subprime used loans continue near record lows with prime over 58% of the business. Okay, I just said the Pareto rule. We have a smaller segment of the population buying a larger percentage of the inventory and being able to finance that inventory, while a larger percentage of the largest percent of the population who are now considered near prime, right? Because pre-pandemic, they were prime, just like we said. When 3 years ago, 650 credit score, forgive me for saying Beacon, but 650 credit score, pre-pandemic was considered prime. Now it's near prime. 700 is just now starting into the prime. So if you take a look at what I'm showing you here, these are used loan risk distributions by year, right? And you can see that, it's been pretty steady across the board. Each year has been a little less than the prior year. So within the top two categories, they're responsible for the majority of the finance. Those credit bands, the majority of the finance of new and used vehicles that are over and above the $400 max payment that most of the Americans today can afford are being financed by that higher category. What about the bottom three? What about the near prime? That 20% is near prime. Have you seen what the interest rate is for a near prime consumer today?
What is it, 7 and 9?
Oh no, 13+%. You go to any auto payment that's just on the auto loan, right? Go to any auto loan payment calculator and say I have fair credit, and they'll give you an estimate range, and it's in the teens, it's in the low teens, and you were used to getting the preferred rate 3 years prior. So right. When I've had this conversation, customer credit expectations versus what the industry can actually deliver. Over 3 years ago, this is a consumer who always got the best rates, always got the best credit because they paid their bills. Right? Through no fault of their own, because they are highly leveraged with their debt, just like they were raised to be. They are now near prime. Do you think that consumer? Go ahead.
Like 2 months ago, I think it was about 2 months ago, I saw the rate of people late on payments was at an all-time high. Has that just continued on? It sounds like that's just continued on then. Do we have data on that now?
It's a huge, not so anything from Q4 is not completely updated yet. So I don't expect to get the real numbers on that until March. It's usually about 3 months behind before you get all the lenders in reporting and really updating their data. So I took a look. Oh, yeah, we talk about you and I again. We've had this discussion about the affordability crisis many, many times throughout the year, right? Because the majority of the people need to finance their next used car.
Right.
But I wanted to take a look, what's affordable right now in the marketplace, right? And a few months back, I shared an article I think it was put out by the Money Magazine, I believe it was, where they said that the average person in the U.S. can barely afford $400 car payment on top of everything else that they've got to pay based on what's going on in the economy so far, right? So I took a look at that number. $400 is the ideal payment for the average consumer. And I wanted to understand what is the available listed inventory, right? So I put my budget. It's just autotrader.com. I put a $400 per month payment, no trade, right? I said, I'll do $2,477, roughly 10% down. And I said I had, great credit, 8.84% for 72 months. Now, before I move forward, the likelihood of a 3-year-old vehicle with 75,000 miles getting financed for 72 months, what do you think that percentage is? High or low?
I'd say low.
Very low, right? So we're still looking for the kind of inventory that needs to be 0 to 3-year-old, under 50,000 miles total, in order to qualify for 8.84% for 72 months. And so this does not include tax tag and title, doesn't include any F&I product, right? This is just the basics you're looking at here. And I did a national search. And so you can see right here, national search. Let me go over here. My radius, nationwide. You see where I'm circling nationwide?
Yeah.
Right? I used very good credit terms, and I'm still getting 8.84% on this is what they say is the national average, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's fuzzy, but it's 24/7. So that means that the actual price range of the vehicle being retail listed wise needs to be between 25,500 and 26,000. By the time you put your money down at tax tag and title, no product or a little bit of product, you're right about 20, right at 20, 25,500 to be at a $400 payment at 72 months. But now look at this. You see what it says under 100,000 miles?
Yeah.
41,518 listed vehicles are under 100,000 miles. Now, I didn't want to bake anybody's noodle by actually putting in under 45,000 miles because it would really tell a story. But you see on the bottom here, it says 670,000 results. So that's how many vehicles are listed that fit the program parameters I typed in. Mind you, they don't dedupe. So there's a lot of duplicate listings in there. And you can see that if there's 670,000 vehicles and only 41,000 of them are under 100,000 miles, what does that tell you about the rest of the listed inventory? You get where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Right. So here's the second challenge. NADA recently put out that they said there's roughly 16,839 franchise dealerships nationwide. Right. So if you divide, hold on, let me do this, make sure I got this right. If you divide 670,221 units nationwide by 16,839 dealers, franchise, not independent, just franchise dealerships, 40 units in stock per store.
Look at Peter's comment.
Peter. Correct. He's right.
But there's light at the end of the tunnel if we open our eyes, because what vehicles have dropped in value like a rock, and what vehicles now have incentives to lower those prices further.
The electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm. What?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The EVs.
That's an opportunity for 2024.
Well, there's a tremendous opportunity for that. But if you remember, I put a vlog out when they first started talking about that. I did an actual search of what vehicles, electric vehicles, A, would qualify for the used vehicle incentive, and B, fit the payment parameters that would qualify for that kind of for the program, for the federal guidelines, right? I even put the links to the federal guidelines and did all of that. Less than like 9,000 vehicles nationwide at the time available, listed for sale. You could do it on Autotrader. Do just what I did right now. You can do the exact same thing. Go back and pull the federal guidelines. The challenge is not that we want to sell the car. The challenge is we got to have the right kind of inventory to meet the demands for the majority of the people. And I go back to the Pareto principle. We're servicing the top 20% of the industry, the top 20% of consumers, people who can't afford to buy and will pay more. And it's at the expense of the rest. So this is a different view. All right. This is Black Book Pulse. Yeah. And with this, I'm able to dedupe the available listings in the marketplace today. So while Autotrader was showing 670,000 listings, I'm going to show you as of this week, from January 1, 2024 through January 7th, what was available in 2020 to 2023 model.
Yeah.
Between 1,000 and 45,000 miles. Dealer type only, franchise, because that's what I want to focus on for now.
Yeah.
Price was $25,500 to $26,000. So I can fit that bucket of, because again, we're at the whim and mercy of the lender to be able to sell inventory. Unless the customer's paying cash, we're not going to, what's it, 15% cash sale, 20% in the store today. So that means that the other 85 to 80% needs to be financed. That's your lender is in control of what you can sell that car for. So you got to have the right mix of inventory. As you can see right now on the right-hand side, active listing, 23,819 with the mileage requirement of 1,000.
Not a lot of cars.
Not a lot of cars. Not a lot of cars. Not when you divide it between 16,800 franchise dealers.
Yeah,
right?
That's nothing.
So let's back up. How many years have you and I been talking about the need for the dealer community to get into the direct game, buying directly from me and from you? How many years?
Beginning of the pandemic, my friend.
Absolutely. I got 2 Honda Accords sitting in my driveway right now. One's a 2019, and the other's a 2020 for my daughters. Both 50, 60,000 miles. Unicorns. If I were to sell those things at the auction, you're talking it's blood in the water. I call the auctions now a shark pit. It's a feeding frenzy for that kind of car because you can't find them in the lane. You can find them in people's driveways. The whole message. So 2024, scarcity. That's the message I've got. The Pareto principles in full effect. While it looks like dealers' inventories are full, they don't have the right inventory.
Well, to just go back a step here on the EV story, okay? Now, granted, overall adoption is low, so there are very small numbers of those cars in the pool. However, to the savvy dealer that figures this out, that's a great opportunity to supplement, because I'd say probably 90+% of dealerships are afraid of them.
They are.
And quite frankly, they don't know how to sell them.
Or buy them. Or buy them.
Or I mystery shop on a regular basis, and I get the same answers. I said, give me 3 reasons why I should own one. And I've yet to have somebody tell me exactly why or what the benefits are to the customer. And there are benefits. Look, I don't care if you're for them, against them. None of that matters to me, okay? All I know is there's a ton sitting on lots now, and there's more coming.
Oh, yeah.
So we could keep going like this and hoping that it goes away. But the reality is it's not going to go away. Sure, you know, some OEMs have pulled back on the production, but how many are still sitting on the ground somewhere?
Yep. I will I'm going to send you the actual article that I did, the blog post I did about the EVs, so you can reshare it with your audience, because I include all the requirements, the federal guidelines, the actual how do you identify, does this particular used VIN actually qualify? Because that's going to be I don't know about you. Do you remember cash for clunkers, the nightmare dealers had to go through to get their money? You know, there were dealers who went bankrupt waiting for that money. Under cash for clunkers. Do you think this program is going to be any easier if they make a mistake? No. So if you want to understand, again, you and I talk about this as a dealer, you need to know your own market. You need to intimately, even better, because just because you have the freaking shingle and you have inventory doesn't mean you're a really good dealer. Just because you're selling inventory doesn't mean you're a really good dealer. There's so much more opportunity when you start actually managing to it. You understand? So the availability of the right price electric vehicle in the country. Well, if I'm a smart dealer, and I know there's only, at the time when I did the study, it was less than 10,000. Guess what I'm doing? I'm finding out where those used the electric vehicles are in the country. And I said, this was my suggestion, find out where they are and market to the consumer in that area. You want to buy their vehicle. Yeah, I might be in Ohio and I'm looking at California to buy all these cars. I'll ship them because I know what's going to happen starting this month.
Listen, you've got a head start on being able to buy some of these cars, because it's a double-edged sword. The people that own them, for the most part, would own another one. Okay, and they're bought into the value and the savings, whether it be fuel costs, maintenance. They're bought in. But at the same time, you've got a particular energy sector that's spending billions of dollars to scare the crap out of people with all kinds of disinformation to not buy them or to get rid of them. So if you play on that, you should be able to supplement nicely. I'm not saying, join the scare tactics, but there's enough people out there doing a great job for you that you should be able to buy more.
Go back to my FANG analysis, right? That's why I was using that. It's being done in other industries, right? Industries as a whole are being diluted with messaging that's pro and not really giving the truth. And if you're a smart dealer, like you just described, you could take advantage of it and use it. And I love what you said. You said that if you had started this back in late summer when I put this out, then you would have these dealers who bought those electric vehicles who would have a huge head start against every other dealer, because they would have the process in place, they would have the methodology, they would have the transport systems. They would be buying cars. Those specific electric vehicles from all over the country, right out from under other dealers who are sleeping.
Yeah, they'll walk away from it. They don't even want to know what the opportunity is. They just complaints.
Right. So why are we predicting, and why are so many others looking at saying, why is the retail price still so strong in the market? I'm going to boil it down to scarcity. And to give an example of why I say scarcity, this is an investment law trend. The top 10 luxury investments that have the greatest return on investment over 10 years. It's phenomenal when you track it. From the second column from the left, 25% are cars. Not just any car. These are collectibles, exotics, muscle cars, things like that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sharing this with you to ask one simple question, your audience, one simple question. What makes those vehicles such a good deal? I mean, as an investment, why are those vehicles such a solid investment? Scarcity. Really.
I've seen the price. I'm watching the prices on vintage cars.
Yep.
And they're stupid money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cars that sold for $2,500, $3,000 when they were new are in the $60,000 to over $100,000 range.
Correct. That's why these investments are known as investments of passion. But it's because of the scarcity. If you are an investor and you can afford it, you want a limited edition, you want a vehicle that no one else has got, and you're willing to pay the money for it. That is the consumer psychology that we have today. Not just in investors that I just showed you, across the board. That is the reason why our retail valuations that we show, the average retail price listed, we're still getting, we finished 2021 at 136% advance for retail asking price. 136% higher than it was starting in 2020, if you remember that, right? So from 2021, how much of that have we given up? We're still fluctuating right about 127, 26%. I mean, think about that. Today, the retail asking price is still strong because of scarcity for the right kind of inventory. And because there is so much in the market right now available for inventory that's higher mileage, edgier in units. Eventually what happens is the John Q public starts to recognize that's all I have to pick from. So I need to find the best of what I can pick from. You follow my thinking there?
Yeah, when you were looking at cars, you were seeing some really shady stuff out there too.
Mm-hmm.
Blemished titles going for premium money.
Every time, I process it in, and I want to make sure that it's got a good, clean title, and 50% hit because just 3-4 months ago that was a salvage title vehicle or a flood title vehicle, and the dealer, and these are these were independents, were representing them as clean title vehicles, asking full retail asking price for these cars, and it went with no shame, whatsoever. Even when I called them out on it, said, you realize that there's no statute of limitations if a consumer buys that vehicle and something happens to them because of you didn't disclose the condition of that vehicle. And their number one is they could pull a Carfax too, or they could pull an auto check. But if the consumer buys it anyway, which is bad for us to be able to do. But the good news is there's too much data out there, too much good information for people who are now considered near prime, who were prime. They won't fall for the inventory. They won't buy. So we're going to see, 3 of my buddies told me they're getting customers approved left and right to buy inventory, to buy their cars, but they can't sell the car based on the lender guidelines. There's not enough advance being provided to cover the negative equity. Their customers are getting approved, but yeah, you got to put $15,000 down to be able to trade your car. Right. So those are left-handed.
Peter's comment. Says the question is there with EV, given the average age of 3X and ICE vehicle and 34 days to zero profit, why would a dealer load up? Well, right now, the prices are stupid low. I mean, the values have dropped tremendously. And with the incentives and, a little bit of money down, they're in the payment where they need to be.
$4,500 worth of incentives, Peter, if you've got the right vehicle that fits the program, the federal program guidelines. And then once you have enough of that inventory, you can start marketing that inventory to your customer database. And then you have to educate and train your salespeople and your F&I managers.
Bingo.
Those kind of intelligent conversations. That's why people like myself and people like Paul and people like Tim and people like Jason Rice and others, many have started having this discussion over 9 months ago. Get ready, start developing the process, start developing your people, train them and get them ready. Get them ready.
It's funny. There was a thread on LinkedIn and people tend to puff their chest sometimes on LinkedIn, and they talk about, hey, who are you to question this particular dealer's salesperson's ability, or you don't understand their customers. Well, something between here and California, the difference between people is that they speak differently and they look differently, but the same problems persist. I don't care where you are. So I took it upon myself to call the store, and I asked for sales, and I asked the salesperson, I'm interested in EVs. Can you tell me why I would want to buy one? And this kid says to me, and this is one of the top stores in the country, mind you, because they're great for the economy. I said, excuse me?
That's it.
I said, what do you mean by that? He says, well, there's less pollution. So I'm thinking that the salesperson confused ecology with economy. Even when I asked him a second time, okay, well, what else? Well, you'll save lots of money on oil changes going forward. Well, how much am I going to save on my oil changes? He says, a lot. Well, how much is that? Well, I'm not sure. Oh, okay. So I said, let me ask you one more question, because you've been really helpful here. I said, what's it cost me to charge? If I buy one of these, what would it cost me to charge it? He says, it's free. I said, it's free. Where's it free? Oh, right down, there's a Target right down the street from the dealership. There's this other place and another place. He had a whole list of places where, everywhere I go is going to be free. Well, what about if I want to charge it at home? How much does that cost? He said, well, that's free also. It's free if I charge it at home. He says, yeah. So the opportunity is there, but we need to really check our egos at the door and enlist somebody to teach them what the benefits are in order to sell them.
Right. Okay. And you have to understand that consumer, credit-wise, as a credit, because they got to finance, they're not your typical subprime, near prime consumer. So they can't be treated like we used to treat a subprime customer.
Well, Peter's got an interesting comment there. He said, but time is not on your side with changing consumer mindset. Remember, I'm a 5-time Tesla owner and multiple hybrid. Additionally, I spent many years in critical and rare earth. I would not stock them. Look, people are sensitive to money. If I can show you that over the next 2 years, you're going to save $4,000 to $6,000, depending on what you get, I'm pretty sure I can get somebody interested. The problem is we're not educating our salespeople to have those conversations. If you look at all the data, it says money has, especially last year, over the year before, pricing is something that's more important to the consumer. So I don't buy into that. It's something that's going to take a long time. You show me how to save $4,000 to $6,000, I'm interested.
Well, it's not just $4,000 to $6,000 up front, right? You got to take a look. The level of desperation these near prime consumers and even prime consumers that have massive amount of negative equity can come up with some cash, not enough cash down, but some. Right. And now you have the right type of electric vehicle that qualifies for a $4,500 incentive, plus that customer's cash. You got a deal, and you help that customer understand. Not only are you getting this money up front, but now your overall cost of maintenance and ownership for the next 2 years, you're going to save $200-300 a month, right? Mark Zandi, chief economist of Moody's Analytics in October, He's the first brave analyst that actually took a look at what it costs, the basket of goods that it takes for the average consumer to live pre-pandemic, monthly basis. What was it? And this was in October when he put this out.
Yeah.
$734 a month increase. No extra product, no extra services, just the same baskets of goods and services that you did monthly, pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. He's the first one that came up with that. And actually Ant did the announcement and said, this is it. Now, these are consumers who are being taxed and stressed like crazy. And if you can educate them to the point and say, look, this is the only vehicle I can help you with. But let's take a look at what's going to happen for you financially. That kind of conversational consulting is a skill set that needs to be educated and trained. And if you see this graph, this is the available inflow of used vehicles up to 8 model years for the foreseeable future. We put this out early last year. You could see clear through 2027, we're not going to recover 100% to pre-pandemic levels. Right.
If you make those deals, you're taking in a car on trade also.
Yes. Yes. And you can properly price that vehicle to what the market should be. Right. Because
last year, 48%, there's a CDK did a study, a friction point study. I don't know if you had a chance to see that. No, if you didn't, I'll send it to you. Pretty interesting stuff. Last year, 48% of the shoppers are price sensitive.
Oh yeah,
because the prices have been so stupid.
I think more than that. In reality, if consumers are being really honest, they're all price sensitive. All of them. You know, there are 2 articles again put out in October. One article is if you're making $150,000 a year, you're not as comfortable as you used to be. And the second article is if you're $100,000 a year income, you're struggling paycheck to paycheck now.
Yeah, 100 is not what it used to be.
No, it's not. People are looking for ways to reduce their overall expense by still owning a good quality vehicle. And the strategy of that pre-owned electric car, again, it's a good idea. But we also talked about the secrets where I think is hidden gold. What's in the customer's driveway, right? So this is an article that was put out just 5 days ago. And it was the CBS New York.
Yeah.
Yep. CBS New York. You know, they quoted us. Cars are holding 10% or more of their value after 3 years than they were pre-pandemic, right? So there are things that you and I have been discussing just literally on every show and in every convention we go to that we share with dealers. And there's a large majority of us that do. Like what the first thing is 100% service appraisal process on every RO. I still get dealers today saying, I just can't see how to do it. And they don't think, right, that they're not trying to expand. They're not trying to expand. You're right. They're not that hungry. But if they did that, I know of dealers who have done it. Brian Kramer is one of them. Hadn't been in the lane up. He's not been to the shark pit to buy a car in years when he was running a dealership. I've got a Chevrolet Cadillac Buick dealer in Central Ohio. He hasn't been to an auction in 4 years. 100% of his inventory comes from service appraisal and 100% cash offer on every consumer who visits his showroom. Whether they're just shopping, he's putting a check writing number in their hands, right? He's also trained every single person in his organization. You and I have talked about this, right? With the power of mobile apps, a dealer either partner with a trade appraisal tool with a well-designed process or use black book data. If they don't like a cookie cutter approach,
make your own.
Yeah, you could design your own software as an app and then train every single person that works for you, top down, front to back, to go out and buy inventory for you.
I've been saying that. I've said that in forums, and it gets poo-pooed over because, you know, maybe their sponsors aren't interested in doing that. They'd rather look at the old ways of doing things. You got 100 people working at a dealership. Okay. I'm not saying all 100 of them are going to be, you know, qualified, let's say, to just input simple data, but just do the numbers. Well, how big is your family, extended family, friends, family, people you work with, people you go to church with, all these people? It's a huge tribe. right? Do all those people like and trust you?
Oh, yeah, I hope so.
Most of them. Might be one or two, right?
Right. Might be one or two.
But the point is, if you initiate a conversation, if you know what you need, okay, everybody has a buy list. Data is the new currency. I know that sounds cliche, but we know where the cars are, right? We know where they are. If we know those people, they're friends, they're in our tribe, how difficult is it to start a conversation? Hey, you know what? I was talking to my boss, and that car you've got in your driveway, that's a premium car for us. Do you mind if I scan this? Do you mind if I jot the miles down? You've got a tribe of people that like and trust you. The amount of penetration that you can have is crazy.
I've done that a few times with drivers of Lyft and Uber. You know, they're driving an Uber to make extra money. And I'll have casual conversations and find out they've got 2 or 3 other vehicles in their driveway. I'll ask them about their vehicles, and I'll find that unicorn. And I help that Uber or Lyft driver sell that vehicle to one of my buddies who's looking for that car.
Brian did that with a taxi driver recently.
Yeah. And it's so simple to do. You and I have also talked about, to get prepared in 2024. If you don't understand, if a dealer doesn't understand how lenders today, there's a group of lenders and credit unions especially, who are now using alternative data and behavioral stats in addition to a credit score. If they don't understand how all of those things come together to put a deal together, they can't train their their teams to have the intelligent conversation to help that consumer buy a good car. So there are some things in 2024 that's happening that will improve the opportunity for us to sell more units in spite of a tough market, right? Especially with these people who were prime, now near prime or even subprime. Finding that going back to what we talked about, inventory being so thin. Yeah. You want to find good quality cars. I just told you about the 2 that I have in my driveway. You should be, as a dealer, they should be marketing to any consumer that owns a 2013 or 2018, maybe even a 19 model vehicle for free safety inspection. And when they come in, check writing offer. And to make it even better, partner with a service finance company. So if that customer doesn't want to sell their vehicle, but would like to do a repair that you found they need, what's wrong with that picture there? You get an RO. You just got to develop the process to do it.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
And there's more that we can go to, Paul. There's so much.
I want to add a couple things here. All right. So we see where the numbers are. We see what the availability of inventory is. We still know that we need to improve our strategy for acquiring vehicles. And we've shared a couple of things here, which you and I have shared a bunch of times. It's almost like yelling fire in a restaurant. People don't look anymore.
They don't
look, right? So a couple of friction points, according to that study from CDK. Waiting times, okay? The amount of time, the price negotiation, how long that takes, and how much time they spent waiting alone, just sitting there. Keep in mind that sales staff has gone down considerably. Okay, people on the front line, I think they're down 30+%. Okay, so you have less salespeople. You have a consumer body whose expectations have gone through the roof. It's beyond unreasonable, and it has been for some time. So how are we going to, and they also determined that customers still want to do business with the dealership. Not everybody wants to buy online. Most people still want to go into the dealership, but here's the thing. And the thing is, they don't want to spend all day at the dealership. I think it's 80+% of dealerships have a digital retailing tool, but 30% or less actually carry that into the store. So they're not getting the benefit of having that tool. The way to cut down on the time is have a tool that works well, Find out who's using it. If you ask, I'll challenge you, Paul. Ask 100 dealers about the data that's contained in their digital retailing tool, and I bet you this many of them will be able to tell you what that data is and how many people actually use it all the way through. Okay, figure out how to get better utilization, figure out how to better promote it so that when the people come in, and then translate it into the store, extend that, because that's what consumers say they want. They want an in-store purchase, but they want to spend less than 2 hours. Your net promoter score goes way into the toilet if it's over 30 minutes to wait for F&I or anything like that, right? So with less salespeople, invest in learning your digital retailing tool and leverage it to cut down on the wait times. The other area where they spend too much time is price negotiation, right? Stores are still, and I'm the outlier here on pricing. I'd rather suck at closing and get the customer, make sure that I understand what the customer's needs are and wants are in their purchase, and then get their agreement all the way through so that at the end, what's the most expensive purchase in your life today, Paul?
The house first, yeah.
A house, right? And second most expensive?
Now it's a car.
The car. You wouldn't buy or sell a house today without doing a comparative market analysis, correct?
That's correct.
Why aren't we doing that with cars? We've got the tools, we've got the data, right? If I say, hey, Mrs. Jones, here's what other cars like yours are selling for in the market. Customers all use the internet to do their research before going into the store. So we're a consumer just like you are. So we do the same shopping that you do. What we found is that most stores charge this much for their cars. There's a couple that charge this much. There's a couple that charge this much. Our price is here, and here's why. Because when you buy from us, you get this, this, and this.
Right.
Okay. Does that make sense to you, Paul?
Makes perfect sense. And it makes a difference.
And if it makes sense to you, it'll make sense to your customer. And it's the same thing with the trade-in, right? Make it a game, educate them, go out. Don't just do the salesperson, do the silent walk around and then toss the keys to the guy behind the curtain. No, take the manager out. Educate them on the condition of the car. So that piece of paper they have in their pocket that says their car's worth 10 grand, when you've educated them about tires, and half the cars that come in on trade need tires, and you've educated on what things cost and what other cars like theirs are for sale in the market today, you get their agreement on, yeah, that's a reasonable value for my car. Now you agree on the price of the new car, you agree on the price of the trade-in. Now we're simply talking what you qualify for rates-wise.
100% true. 100%. And what's funny is I had a conversation with Jim Ziegler last year sometime, can't remember when, but I was talking about the first time I actually had training that he did back about on leasing. This is late 90s, early 90s. I'm sorry, very, very early 90s. And his training then is the same today. Because the basics don't change.
They don't. Even calculating a lease. Ask a salesperson today, hey, can you give me a payment on a lease? They've got the printout on the rates, the residuals, all that, but they can't calculate it by hand. If the computer's not up, they can't give you a payment. Let's see, Steve Apicella. Once we truly embrace earning the recurring customer beyond the one-time transaction, our great industry will be less vulnerable to short and midterm economic impacts. We'll create our own microeconomy of organically returning customers. Our mission before and after the vehicle sale. Cheers, gentlemen. And what's funny too is that when traffic is down, when sales are down, or whatever, what's the first thing we look at? Where can we spend money, right? What's the latest magic bullet?
Right. And that's when advertisers come in and make the most money because they're selling a magic bullet.
And guess how much it can cost you? Zero money if you build your tribe and nurture that tribe. they'll support you. That's what, people don't get. Steve says digital life cycle or in-person engagements. No, not one or the other, both. ICE or EV. No, not one or the other, both. Embracing both broadens our reach. That's what we're talking about. There's no inventory. Create the inventory. The alternative limits it. We need to stop picking sides and rather evolve through all channels before and after the vehicle sale. I don't care if you love or hate EVs. They're here. There's more coming. You got to figure out how to sell them, or you will be left behind.
You're 100% right. And, I think you and I talked about this, right? We talked about the number of dealers that were available, franchise rooftops, pre-crisis of 2008, right? There was just under a little more than 21,000, right? We came out of that crisis with 16,000. Today we got 16,800 franchise dealers. I would hope that through our incessant blathering, sharing the data over and over and over again, we can keep that.
Trying to help.
Yeah, we can keep that from happening. We're trying to keep them in place. I have all the information about the used vehicles, and I'm going to send that to you. So, because the dealers need to know about it, right?
And I'll send you that report too, the friction study report from CDK. It's quite eye-opening.
Mm-hmm. That'd be
Paul,
something.
I want to thank you, man. How does somebody get a hold of you if they want to put together their own program?
It's paul.machin@blackbook.com or myself, 864-238-1234. I've had that number for business for over 30 years.
And you're tagged in this post. So if you're not connected with Paul, click on his name, send him a connection request. And same thing goes for me. We are open to connecting with like-minded professionals, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and so many others at NADA in just a few weeks, man.
I appreciate you. Looking forward to it, brother. See you there.
All right. To those watching live, thank you. I appreciate your support. And those watching on the replay, thank you. If you see that this would help somebody that you know, by all means, share it with them. With that, I wish you a safe and successful next week, and we'll see you next week on Sunday Night Live. Thanks again, Paul.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely.